People buy product for three reasons. They either buy it because it's going to help them make money, they buy a product because it's going to save them money, or it's going to keep them off the front page of a newspaper. There are VCs that are seagulls, fly into a meeting, fly into a location, they basically take a shit and they fly away. And when you're interviewing potential board members, look for relevant experience. Not the fact that they've been on 8 other SaaS boards, but have they ever done anything themselves?
Ready to go? David, I am so excited for this. I mean, I spoke to so many great mutual friends beforehand. Doug Leone said many wonderful things, which is always wonderful to hear. So thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, it's absolutely great to be here. I've been listening to the podcast, and I feel like listening to your podcast was part of my education in becoming a better investor. So thank you for doing what you're doing, and it's just great to be here.
Do you know what? It's the British accent. I get an extra 10 points on the IQ scale just with that, but I'm thrilled that you like it. I do want to start there because you have literally, I think, the most impressive operating career that I've had on the show, definitely for a long time. So when we look at the operating career, what are the single biggest achievements to you that you say to founders as, hey, I did this in my operating career?
Well, thank you. It was a 30 plus year operating career. So in that 30 years, there were some tough years and some good years. But the two things that kind of stand out, I spent almost 9 years at a company called Data Domain, where I joined at $0 in revenue. And by the time I left, we'd gone through an IPO, took it to about $1 billion, and then we got acquired by EMC in a hostile acquisition in 2009. Whole story about hostile acquisitions, if you ever want to get into that. And then the next one is I spent 10 years at ServiceNow, joining Frank Slootman again, who I had the privilege of working with at Data Domain, into that company, which was at about 80 million or so in size when I joined. And when I left, it was $5 billion in revenue, and it felt like the job was well done to make that happen.
Listen, you gave me such a great teaser there. Hostile acquisition, how can I let that go under the rug? What was that process and what did you learn from it?
Oh my God. So in fact, here we are in London, and this is a fun story, is we knew that our business was very valuable, even though in 2009 the stock price went down because the market went down. And at the time in 2009, there was another company called Network Appliance that had approached Frank Slootman about a potential acquisition. And we were close to them. We knew who they were. We were neighbors. They were down the street. A lot of our early engineering team had worked there before, and we did not know EMC. And in fact, Joe Tucci, when we reached out to him to get to know him, he was always hidden from us because of various reasons. So in 2009, we signed a definitive agreement to be acquired by Network Appliance, and it was a good offer. And we had all these integration meetings. And I was actually here in London having dinner on Brick Lane, I know, judgment, okay, with my sales team. And my phone rings, and it was basically the news that EMC was launching a hostile acquisition for our company and outbidding Network Appliance. Now, we were not allowed to talk to the other company because in a definitive agreement, all we could do is stay quiet. But we had lots of interesting emails and texts that came in over the line, and it was apparent to us that they weren't going to go away. But then NetApp responded. EMC takes full-page ads out in the Wall Street Journal, in the local paper, was driving trucks around our office saying, "Can't wait to work with you people at Data Domain." It was. We were the prettiest girl at the dance for the first time in my life, and it was really quite exciting.
Is it a game of the highest bidder wins?
It was. In fact, 4th of July happened, NetApp people went on vacation and EMC didn't, and they knew exactly how much cash NetApp had and what they could do to win the deal. And they made the winning bid over the 4th of July weekend, and we had to respond. The classic point of that was we announced that, yes, we were going to have to accept their offer. That a couple of days later, I was going to have my sales club trip in Mexico with my team. And Joe Tucci's like, "Great, I'll be there." We said, "No, you won't. This is our last moment, our last opportunity." And it was one hell of a party.
What was the spread between the initial and then the final?
Oh, I think, this is in a world where valuations were much different than today. I think maybe 1.8 to 2.2 or 1.7 to 2.2.
Still a decent spread.
Yeah, but imagine buying a company at the time, $550 million in revenue, 75, 80% margins for $2 billion.
What was the growth rate?
about 80%.
Whoa.
Yeah, crazy time. So this was a steal of a steal. And inside of that company, inside of EMC, we drove it to $1 billion that first year and $2 billion in the second. So very transformative product, still being sold by Dell to this day. And great technology, new companies coming along that try to beat it. But that was a fun one.
My God, that is incredible. I also have not heard of like quite the guerrilla marketing style to get you over the line in terms of ads, lorry trucks, you name it. That is fantastic.
They never went away. And, got to respect their style. They were very prepared with a team at integration time and made some magic happen.
When you look at that journey, that was a phenomenally successful journey. What were your biggest takeaways when you look back now with the benefit of hindsight?
Well, I think the first part of that journey that was so important is the first year, we didn't have the right product. We had an initial product that I almost would refer to as a paid-for beta. We knew it had some of the features and elements of what the customers needed. And we were talking about the product in a way as a backup appliance. And very quickly after talking to customers, they're like, it's not about the backup, guys. It's about the recovery. It's about how fast can I recover this data so I can do my job and not get in trouble if something is corrupt. And so we got really good at finding the first use cases where we could be effective every time. And so the other thing we did is it was simple to integrate into existing technologies. We didn't force customers to change their environment. We just plugged right into their existing backup software world. So, simple does win in technology a lot of times. And people need to keep that in mind.
One question I always ask when I'm investing today is when we're analyzing how a company can integrate a tool into their existing stack is, are we adding a line item on the budget, or are we actually removing one? Like, how important do you think being able to answer that succinctly is? And is it a problem if you are adding one now?
I think anytime you bring a new solution forward in an enterprise, anybody who's bringing something in today has to be asked, what are we taking out of the budget? What are we replacing? How is this augmenting? How is it going to make our world better? And we'll get into it more. But what I always try to tell my team, my whole team, the engineering team, the product team, is people buy product for three reasons. They either buy it because it's going to help them make money, they buy a product because it's going to save them money, or it's going to keep them off the front page of a newspaper, which is usually what security products are being bought and sold for. So that's the reason why. So you got to show them how they're going to make money, save money, and that's really important.
Do you know what I always get when I'm on boards? Yeah, you know what, we had this, but it got pushed to next quarter. How do you think about instilling that urgency in any of those three? Because urgency, I guess, is important in all of them.
Yeah, that common thing, that common refrain, we had the sponsor, it just got pushed. That's really a discussion around, was the value of my solution that I proposed worthwhile for them to make the choice for us, or was some other solution that was being proposed, not even if it was competitive to us, but another thing in the company that was being worked on? There's only so many projects somebody can run at once and so many dollars to go solve the problem. So basically the seller's job is to make sure that the value that you're providing is well understood. And we adopted a sales methodology at ServiceNow that featured this, where we had joint value discussions, and we called it a value prompter, that we did with our customers, so that when it was time to go up to the CIO or CEO for $5, $10, $20 million worth of funding, that they knew what the business case was, and it held true. Because deals that slip at the end of the quarter are the nightmares, the bane of your existence, if you're the management team or board. And after a while, you lose faith in your sales leadership about their ability to guide the business. And so my job always was be able to call the number 90 to 180 days in advance, plus or minus 3%. So if you can do that reliably, you can keep your job as a CRO, but more importantly, you know how to guide the business, who to hire, where to hire, how to allocate resources as an executive team on building out a company.
When we go back to those three, save money, make money, or keep you out of prison, as an investor today, do you have a preference for one of them?
I don't. I just want you to be able to answer the question.
Are many founders able to?
No. I think not until we start asking. Now, the best founders, the ones that I really get excited to work with, are the ones that have clarity of thinking about that process.
Do you know what I hate in investing? It's competition. And the amount of people that are like, you know what, we can help you make more money because we deliver you more leads, we allow you to interact better with leads, whatever it is, like sales analytics solutions, you name it. And I hate competition. How do you feel about competition when investing, having won in pretty intensely competitive markets?
So I think in any market that's worth going after, there's going to be some competition, especially in the enterprise space. So the secret for me was it was easier for me to unlock dollars from existing known spend areas than it was for me to create a new spend category and create new budgets that didn't exist before. So if I could show more efficiency or better mousetrap type things, I was going to win more deals faster in those situations. Now, the thing about competition is not all competitors are created equal, Harry. So imagine this is the backdrop. You're at ServiceNow in 2011. The transition to the cloud is happening, okay? The market is starting to give signals that everybody wants to move to the cloud. The two companies we were competing with were BMC and HP Software. Two companies that quite honestly were dead already in my book. All they were trying to do was take money out of the revenue stream and drop to the bottom line. They weren't focused on the customer anymore. So now all of a sudden we have this new idea, same kind of product, but just a lot fresher in a cloud. And I unleashed the hounds of hell of an incredible go-to-market team at the same time. And I just decimate a market that they existed in. Decimate. So that's the fun part about competition, because if you have singular purpose and you know what you're trying to do, you can have a lot of fun blowing up other organizations.
Have you ever had a time, I'm sure, but like when was a time when your GTM team was not crushing, when it was just not decimating? And for the many founders in that position now, how do you rejuvenate them when that is a palpable feeling?
Most of my team would be crushing. And partially because there's a way to get them to be effective. And I think when you are, this is going to go into the how do I build a company and how do I think about it. I think the way you get sales teams going is you identify what your target customer is, the ICP. Okay, so know where you need to play. Know what the issues are that they're facing. Listen to the other customers who are already using your product. Use those stories to tell the stories about transformation, difference making, et cetera, to the other prospects you're working on. Teach your sellers those stories, the playbooks, and we'll talk about playbooks. What do I say? Who do I say it to? What's the profile of the customer that we want to go after? What's the likely objection they're going to give us and how do we overcome it? All of that's inside of the realm of possibility for training and onboarding for my go-to-market team. Then I got to hire a bunch of people that just have to want it a lot more than everybody else. And I look for people with a chip on their shoulder. I look for people that have something to prove, where the best days are in front of them. And I called it at Data Domain, the land of the misfit toys. I wanted people that didn't fit in normal places because I wanted to give them a home where they could do incredible things and be welcome and supported. And so having that edge, so give them the training, give them the playbooks, give them the stories, then hire people that really, really care, that are hungry to change. That's just a dynamic group of activity that you can drive inside of a market.
Are there backgrounds which make salespeople more likely to be great? For example, I actually like it when you find competitive athletes who turn into sports reps and sales reps or salespeople. They can endure great pain for long periods of time for delayed gratification. It's like a core trait, I think, of sales. Is there a background that you found to be commonly very valuable?
One of my first and most important questions when meeting someone is I ask people, tell me something that you're proud of that you had to work really hard for. I'm looking for where they had to dig down and make something important happen. You tend to find a pattern with people that if they've had to overcome something, and I also say we're all survivors of something, just pick your something. And what I want to know is what did they have to get through to get where they are now? What makes them tick?
How do you feel about transparency as a leader? I know we had this beautiful schedule, but I'm loving this. How do you feel about transparency as a leader? We're often told about it being so important, but then there's this question of you do need to sometimes keep morale up artificially. You can't always say the truth. How do you feel about that?
I think people know the truth. And so you're almost better off addressing any issue, strength and weakness, head on, there are also lots of ideas inside of a company. And what I tried to do is almost reverse the pyramid of how organizations would think about it. Some people say everything's top down. Yeah. I don't agree with that. I think we have a strategy or we have a vision of what we should go do. But then I look for the people closest to the customer, closest to the problem, closest to the technology to say, how would we solve it? And if you can empower those people down below, they're going to bring their best self to work on a regular, and you're going to get a lot more ideas trying to solve the tough problem.
How do you empower them? Bring them to the meetings, allow for idea generation in a new way? What is the right way to empower them? It's difficult.
I could think of a couple specific situations where we were dealing with a customer opportunity, this at ServiceNow, and one of my sales engineers said, I'm working on something where it is ticketing, very similar to what we did for IT service management, but they want to use us for HR. And we don't really have that product. Now, there's a couple stories about when we had the product or didn't have the product. I said, well, let's work with them because this may be a really interesting use case. And so we basically put this SE in charge of listening to the customer and demoing back what he'd heard, not through engineering yet. This was just a proof of value kind of experience. And this gentleman, Eric Hemmer, still remember his name, was so important in the gestation and building of the understanding of what the idea was. We then took that to like 3 or 4 other customers, and we showed it to our engineering team. All those customers got really excited about it. We brought it back to engineering and said, we'd like us to build something on the platform, which already does 99% of this. We just need to relabel some things. That's probably a $1 billion product now inside of ServiceNow because we just listened to customers. And that was Eric, who was close to that problem, who listened and said, I've got an idea. Can I go forward? And we were just smart enough to listen.
The numbers with ServiceNow are quite mind-boggling. Did you know it would be as big as it is, or do you agree with the common statement that we always underestimate the size of our winners?
I wish I would have known it was as big as it is. When I got there, it was far from a perfect story.
You got there at 50 million in ARR?
It was a little bigger, about 80, 90 million.
80 million.
And Fred Luddy, who is the founder, great human being, one of the most special founders I've ever met and worked with.
Why?
One, he was customer-centric, absolutely loved solving the problem for the customer. He came out of the space that we were in. He had written the Paragon product, which became the HP product. So as he said, I'm making up for all the sins of my past by building this other thing, which I love that story. I love repeat founders on solving a similar problem just with a better approach. You'll find that as a theme of mine when I make investments.
Is that tough for you as a GTM leader, though, when you have like customer demand through the roof? You can sell, but actually there's technical debt, there's infrastructure problems, and you have to be tempered in your decimation approach.
Not really. I'm a believer that if I'm with the right CEO and the right founding team and the right executive team, that we can be flying the airplane to Japan from San Francisco and doing maintenance on the engines at the same time. And that's what we had to do at ServiceNow. So every once in a while, things were a little bit crazy, but we got through it. And you can't take your foot off the accelerator or somebody else is going to catch you. So even as uncomfortable as that was, we had to go do the maintenance on the airplane while flying it.
Is speed the most important thing in those early days?
Speed is definitely one of the most important things. Speed of decisioning, speed of getting people answers to questions, speed of deciding what's important and then focusing on what's important, really, really important. I think people try to make a perfect decision. By the time you make a perfect decision, it's actually going to be the wrong decision because the issue's already changed.
So I spoke to 12 people before this show, and I think 7 or 8 said your biggest strength was your speed of decision-making and clarity of decision-making. Is there a decision that you made that with the benefit of hindsight, you wish you'd taken longer to make it?
Yeah, I think one of the pieces of feedback I got at one point is get at least 2 points of data before making a decision. I sometimes was such in a rush to move forward. And I worked for a guy, Frank Slootman, who is famously saying, hey, you need to compress cycles every day. Let's make a decision. If it's the wrong decision, we'll fix it.
What was the biggest one you got wrong?
I think people. I think we made a hiring decision at one point. We got convinced that we needed to go outside of the company for a senior go-to-market leader because we hadn't seen some of the things that we wanted to see. We didn't know how to do certain things. Brought a gentleman in. I want to protect the innocent or not. But
not name and shame.
Yeah, but I won't say the person.
Sure.
But we brought a person in, and he was just the wrong cultural fit. And we were so used to being 105 to 120% of our number, and when we called a number, we were over it all the time. In the company he came from, they were used to missing their numbers, and no one ever got fired for missing their numbers. With us, if you didn't make your number, you were not long for the job. If you're missing your number at the end of the quarter, telling me you're going to do something and then miss, that's unacceptable. And so I have to be able to, in my role when I was president and CRO at ServiceNow, is be able to look at the CFO and the CEO and say, I've got this. We can plan the number for the next 6 to 12 months and hit it, right? That's what I have to be able to do. And so if I had somebody on my team that was not able to execute there, that was a problem.
I'm so enjoying this. You said there about kind of bringing someone in versus hiring internally or promoting internally. It is one of the biggest problems for many founders of when to do that versus when not to. How do you advise them?
It's a special place in my heart on this issue because on my journey at Data Domain, there was a moment in time where Frank could have brought in somebody else to run sales. Well, our first year was $3 million goal. I did 2.97. I missed. Right, 2.97 is 3. That to me is as big a miss as if I would have only done 1.5. Right, so that was a miss. The next year we were going to do, call it $9 million, and they were getting nervous. Like, was I the right guy or not? And it was not apparent to me that even I thought I was the right guy, but I was going to go convince them I was. Well, lucky for me, instead of doing $9 million that year, we did 15, and then we did 45. So by the time they figured out I may not be the right guy, we'd already blown through that issue, and they kept me. But what Frank made the decision is, I'm going to ride this horse. He's got the energy. I think you should probably talk to him, but I think he's got the energy, the intelligence, the willpower, the fear of failure that we need to drive this company forward. And whatever he doesn't know, we'll get mentoring for, we'll get coaching for. But the good it outweighs the bad by a long shot. And so for me, it was that opportunity. So when I look at the young people in that role today, I'm rooting for them. I want them to be successful. So every board I join and I see the CRO or the VP of marketing, I want to take them under my wing and mentor them so they can achieve their potential and not get swapped out. So my whole goal is get these people to their potential. The CEO to the potential, the company to the potential, and the individuals on the journey to their potential.
My challenge is I do not think young people want to work like they used to or want to sacrifice like they used to. There are very few that do, and they tend to be founders, but I find that number is less.
I disagree with you completely. I think there are certain founders that also don't want to work that hard. I think there are people that are misguided on that. I think there are people that know they'll never be a founder. Guys like me, I would never, ever be a founder. But boy, my job is to I use analogies a lot. So I viewed founders and engineering team, they were the artists. They were building this incredible product. It's like artwork. And the analogy I use is, remember when you were young and you'd bring your artwork home from your kindergarten class and you'd go, Mom, look at this. And if on a good day, she'd put it up on your refrigerator, how'd that make you feel?
Great.
My job is to put the artwork of these engineers on every refrigerator in the world. That's my job. I need to go find people that view that not as a founder, but the partner to that founder, that see that burden, that opportunity, the privilege of doing that is something that they want to do. And I think there are people out there that want to work that hard.
80 million, 90 million, give or take, for when you came to ServiceNow, to 5 billion.
Yeah.
Anything that we haven't mentioned that you think is crucial in really enabling that successful revenue scaling? Well,
it was a fun one. When I joined, they had about 16 reps. And if you look at just sales capacity, that meant the capacity they had at about $1.5 million a rep was about, call it roughly less than $30 million. The goal for that next year was $100 million of new business. I had $30 million of capacity going into it. I hired 150 people in less than 90 days, and we did the $100 million.
And how did you ramp them so effectively and so quickly?
I'm really good at my job. No. So I am really good at my job. But what happened was there was market pull for the technology. There was definitely a receptiveness to it. we had probably underserved the profile of potential customers. We probably didn't have enough people on the street. So there was some pent-up demand for us. One of the things we did is we changed our pricing as well. So I got rid of some of the discounting modes that we were dealing with. We basically doubled street price in that first quarter, which helped us double the revenue for that first quarter. And because I had gone to that user conference and was watching the feedback from these customers, giving massive standing ovations to the founder, telling me this was the best technology they've ever purchased, I had a lot of confidence in the value of the product against the problems we were solving.
What opportunity did you not take that you wish you had taken?
If I go back in ServiceNow, we knew that we wanted to take that company public in 1.5 to 2 years after getting there. That was just our mode of thinking. Like, our job was get liquidity for investors, take this company public, get it out in the public market so that customers would have visibility and understanding of who we were, what our financials looked like. We wouldn't be portrayed as some small little Silicon Valley startup or San Diego-based startup anymore. We wanted to be a public company.
Did you have a revenue goal in mind for what you needed to do or get to be public?
Absolutely. From day one. Well, that first year, getting $200 million from 100 was very important on that goal. And it really came down to 2 last deals at the end of a Q1 what year was it? 2012 that I was working on that we got over the line that allowed us to hit the button to file our IPO. So it gets that close sometimes where the numbers have to be lined up. And then we had to prove that we had visibility of the pipelines so that you wouldn't miss for the next 4 to 8 quarters after you go public. A lot of pressure.
What did you go out at price-wise?
I think it was $18 a share.
Which is market cap?
A couple $1 billion.
Couple of billion. And today it's?
170 billion. It's shocking. I mean, and by the way, during that IPO process, we had Gartner show up at a lot of the investor pitches and say the size of the ITSM market is going to be capped out at $1 billion. So we don't see the growth potential for ServiceNow. That was Gartner. And so it was one of the reasons we hated Gartner for a while at ServiceNow, but that was a real big blow. And we had to talk our way out of something. And now that business is much, much bigger than $1 billion.
Given that, how do you think about analyzing market size as an investor today? As you said, we don't see a pathway out over $1 billion. Gartner specialize in market sizing. How much focus do you put on market size today when investing?
I put a lot of focus on how big the market is, but I also don't think it's easy to understand when it's going from an on-prem world to in the cloud world. And as it becomes easier, and anytime you make technology easier for the customer, the markets grow. And so I think that there's some value in understanding if I can consumerize something that was really difficult before, does that make the market grow?
How important is market timing for you when investing? You mentioned there the speed to IPO and what you wanted to do. You have to hit the market just at the right time for that to be possible. For you investing today, how do you think about that?
I think it's true. You can be too early in markets, and it's hard to know, right, when you're too early until you make the investment.
I think as Mark Andreessen says, there's no such thing as a bad idea, only a bad time.
Yeah, I think the pain from the existing strategy has to be understood. I think that if you don't know what you're solving for, so when I'm listening to founders, and they're like, here's the reason why now is the time for X, Y, or Z to be successful. I'm going to then go validate that in our research calls with external parties to try to make sure it's the right time.
Does being a sales leader help you on your referencing for companies? Because you are, as a sales leader, probably the most attuned to people, to listening, to knowing what question to ask. It's a real art form. Does being a sales leader help you do the best diligence and reference process?
And there's an art of discovery. That is what we call it in sales, where you get into a conversation with a customer and you start asking questions. And that question then leads to another statement, which then you can probe around. And it's a natural conversation like this interview is between two new friends. And we have that discourse. So as I talk to them, I'll be like, okay, well, what do you think about this? Why is this important? How would you sell it internally? What would you be taking out to be able to afford it? Things like that become really interesting to me as I'm doing diligence. So yeah, I think it helps, but I think it's that art of the question and not being satisfied with just the first answer, but digging deeper, because the truth is usually the second or third question you ask will get you closer to the truth.
And being comfortable with silence. It's one of the most important skills I think you learn as an interviewer. I suggest everyone always interviews. I think you become a better husband or wife, a better friend. But being able to ask a question and sit in silence can be quite awkward. But most often, magic leads after the silence.
Yeah, you don't want to talk just to hear yourself talk. And I tell salespeople all the time, like, hey, you got 2 ears and 1 mouth. Spend equal amount of time listening where the 2 ears is talking. And you should be asking questions, not just talking. And that will get you closer to a motivation, truth, a reason why to buy, et cetera, than just by talking.
What's a big mistake that you made with ServiceNow when you think about the mistakes made in that journey? I know it's all up and to the right. I know the numbers show that, but everyone makes mistakes.
So we made a mistake. We were getting pressured down market from what I call low-end competitors. We call them ankle biters, which probably isn't a great term. But we started getting worried because, if some of these people could get traction down there, would they ever be able to go up into our customer base? We were worried about the low end. We built a product called ServiceNow Express. It was written by the same people that wrote the enterprise product. We tried to dumb it down. We did a terrible job at dumbing it down. We brought it to market. There was interest in it. We were selling it for $10,000 to $15,000 versus $50,000 at the entry price. Did a lot of transactions and made a lot of companies unhappy. Product wasn't easy to use. It became a burden for us on support. And quite honestly, we were an enterprise company trying to act like something else. And what I realized is there's 10 competitors down market. Let them go beat the crap out of each other down there. They'll drive all the investor dollars into the toilet, and we'll just sit here and focus on what we do really, really well and own the market that matters. And so that's what we did. We exited a market. We made that mistake.
How quickly was the mistake apparent?
Probably in the 6 months. We just didn't want to hear it.
How long did it take to make the decision?
About 1.5 years.
I've had worse.
Yeah, I mean, we were pretty ruthless about decisioning. And as I said, one of our strengths was make decisions quickly. At the same time, we had to be bold enough to say some of the decisions I made on the journey aren't perfect. I've got to go chase that perfection, make a different decision.
One of the biggest mistakes I see founders make that we invest in today is they want to expand customer segment too soon. They want to expand into enterprise too soon. They want to expand into SMB from enterprise too soon. And I always say it is so much deeper and richer than you think. And we've only penetrated 1% of it. Let's absolutely double down where our strength is. How do you think about when is the right time to expand customer segmentation and when is the right time to say no? We're going to focus.
What started happening at ServiceNow that we took advantage of was our customers started using our product in places that it wasn't originally positioned for. Turns out that by 2015, we had hundreds of customers using us in new ways. And so what we started to do is just listen. And then we productized what they did and built full-on customer service product, full-on security incident vulnerability products, full-on HR employee experience products. And because we just followed the customer, we had better success. That was not easy because we ended up creating business units. I had to come up with a different selling model to sell new technology because the buying persona was outside of the core. I didn't do it until I was fairly penetrated and winning in ITSM. If I didn't feel like I was already winning there, and it was not a distraction, then I could do it.
ServiceNow today, and ServiceNow while you were there, it has so many products.
It's incredible.
It's incredible. My question to you, how do you win with so many products? It is a difficult product marketing challenge. It's a difficult go-to-market challenge. How do you think about the lessons from this insane multi-product challenge?
So I think a lot of it has to do with how we managed our teams and what we did from an extreme ownership perspective. There was one metric that mattered to everybody at ServiceNow. In fact, up until recently, they had a bonus profile that was every quarter, we would fund a bonus pool based on the company's achievement of net new ACV, which was new business minus any churn. So everybody was worried about churn revenue and top line revenue, right? New business. So everyone was focused on that. Then as we started to launch these new business units, I remember when Frank and I were talking about it, and this is Frank's genius. He did it before John came in, and it was like his parting gift to the business that is still sustainable today. We said, we need people that are going to wake up in the morning and care about this, because I had a business that with ITSM and with our IT operations management products, my reps were already blowing out their numbers. So I needed to worry about the strategic issue 2 to 3 years from now. If that market ever slowed down, if we got penetrated, what was going to be the next act? And so we actually launched 4 products at the same time in 2015 or 2016. I thought we were going to kill 2 of them because for me to be viable, it had to be 100 million in 3 years. That was sort of the goal we had for each of these things. 0 to 100 million, which would be equal to be some of the fastest growing startups in the Valley ever, right? Take a product from 0 to 100 million in 3 years. We were doing that inside of ServiceNow. We did all of them at the same time. That was really, really friggin' hard.
What % of that revenue is from net new customers versus from existing that you have the benefits distribution to?
In the early days, I would say by product, it was different. And all of my reps cared about all the revenue. So we had a land, expand, retain model. We did not believe in customer success. We can talk about that too if you want. And so every rep, every SE was responsible for the full life cycle of a customer. From the first time you got them excited about the idea of something to the time where they'd upgraded many, many times and bought other products. That's what I wanted from the people.
I cannot not to ask that. Why not believe in CS? We had Chris Degnan on from Snowflake, and he's like just completely denigrated CS and said that's why we don't have it and it's bullshit, basically.
Frank and I, when we got to ServiceNow, there was a group called Customer Success. What I found in that group is when I asked them, what do? They basically did 3 things that should have fit into other groups. They either were taking calls from customers saying, something's not working, help me, support me. Our support department was woefully under-resourced, so they weren't getting the responsiveness. So that job should have been handled by support. Get rid of that, make support do that job. I want to add more capacity. You're doing well. How do I add more licenses? That job should be done by sales. How do I configure something in my system? I'd like help hands-on keyboard. That should be a paid-for professional service. So we got rid of customer success because, quite honestly, it was just a make-believe organization that didn't need to exist. A lot of people get excited about it because they're worried about the churn in their business. We were a 98% plus renewal rate, so I didn't have a churn problem. So how are they going to show up and say, what did I do that was uniquely me, that was different, that I could measure and get outcomes? I could never get customer success people to tell me what they actually did during a day that made us make money. And so the same problem that I said, people buy product to make money, save money. I had another problem. I had to fund more people in support. I had to fund more people in sales. And I had to build my professional services and partner ecosystem. So I got rid of it. And I brought it back slowly over time in very boutique ways. But the customers actually paid for those resources, not given away.
Do you think with the companies you work with today, do you think they should have CS teams?
No. I think that many of them are coming to the same realization. I was talking to one CEO of a fairly largely scaled SaaS company, and he told me, we are going to be revisiting these decisions. And it's fun because, I can't say to people, I told you so, but I start planting the seed. What are they doing? What's your metric? How many do you need? By what's your factor? Most customer success organizations come at it with, hey, I need this many people for this many accounts or for this much revenue. In every organization, I think, how do I become more efficient over time? And so every structure, I have to drive efficiency. How many dollars per sales headcount am I driving? How many dollars of revenue am I driving for every engineering resource, everybody in finance? So if I can't get efficiency, I'm not doing my job as a leader in a business.
We have had many people from Founders Fund on in the past, including your Brian Singermans of the world, who very clearly has the belief that the best founders do not need help. How do you respond and think about that?
My first response is probably because he doesn't know how to help them. Maybe that's the reason. I think everybody in life could always use a friend to talk to, could use an honest conversation. And there is a difference, by the way, between founder friendly and founder helpful. And I think I have to walk the line between what I call founder friendly. I'm in your camp, but I'm going to also tell you the truth, and I'm going to get you ready for what's coming. And sometimes that truth is hard to hear, but I got to be doing that. And you have to know as a person like me that your job is not to do it for somebody. Your job is to coach, guide, consult, be a mentor, almost like being a grandparent versus a parent.
What was the hardest thing about making the transition?
Learning that I wasn't an expert, learning how to have a beginner's mindset on something, not get the accolades that you would, I used to travel into London or Japan, and there'd be a whole team of people waiting to meet me, and fancy dinners and car service and all this other stuff. This is like, hey, you got to start again at the beginning, add value, figure out your value to those people, and not come out with a massive ego.
I'm sure we have many mutual friends who are bluntly very powerful. I'm sure you had many powerful people tell you advice on entering venture. What advice did you get?
Most of them said, don't do it. Most of them said, why are you going to take, you're at the apex of your career. You could go do a CEO job if you wanted to, go be another president or CRO. Every company under the sun wants to recruit you. And to be clear, everybody called. Like, you name the top company in the Valley, they all called me looking for me to join the companies. And it still happens today. I am making a conscious decision that at this point in my life, this is what I want to do. And I'm having a lot of fun doing it.
How quickly do you know whether you like investing or not?
Oh, I think it's taken me a couple of years because I went through a bit of a cycle. In 21, when I joined, it was, let's get deals done. There's a lot of pace to it. That was kind of fun. And what I figured out really quickly was...
How long did it take before you did your first deal?
Probably too quickly. I did my first deal in about 2 months.
You said before that your home is generally kind of Series B, maybe Series C. We had Sam from Greylock on the show, and he said that actually this vintage of Series B and C would not be positive cash returning to LPs. The entry price is too high, with revenue multiple compressions being where they are from public markets. It's just too difficult to make money. Do you think he's right?
I think you have to be careful. I think every opportunity is worth diligencing on its own. And you've got to be able to underwrite what you think the value is going to be. The biggest risk factor is something starts slowing down before you expect it to. So you make the investment, you think you've modeled it out, it's going to go from X to Y to Z. And we usually even take a haircut on that model from whatever the company tells us. And for whatever reason, it slows down too fast. And then we don't get to the kind of return multiples we want. So again, enter Dave Schneider. My job is to help you make sure you're hitting and beating your revenue goals. So again, if you're a Series B or a Series C founder, the opportunity is right now, pick the right investor for this stage of your company that's going to make a difference in your business.
What are the biggest reasons businesses plateau? We see so many between 50 and 100 where the growth just comes off a cliff. What are the reasons why those businesses plateau at that stage?
Yeah, I think there are a couple things that I look at on why businesses plateau. First, do they know their customer? And who are their customers? If you're a business selling to other young technology companies and that's your source of revenue, I'm going to discount some of your future opportunity just from day one. If you had shown me proof of selling to the large enterprise or a combination of size customers, I'm going to believe that we can sell to other like-sized companies in the future. And the smaller companies are more susceptible to the waves of the market, especially with venture funding being hot or cold at any one point in time. If you started winning in pharmaceutical and banking and others, other big verticals, I think it starts to get more applicable and it stretches out more. So who are your customers, the source and quality of the revenue? Have you been through a renewal cycle yet? Is a big question that a lot of investors miss. Okay, so I'm looking for, have they gone through a renewal cycle? What happened? Did the ACV grow at that renewal? Did they add more product to it? Or did it shrink or not renew? If it didn't renew, that's a big problem.
So the renewal cycle is a big pushback on the 3-year contracts because you don't get the feedback as frequently as you would an annual. How do you think about that lack of feedback from the longer cycle?
So you start seeing it in NRR, right? So even in year one, at ServiceNow, when we sold a contract, it could be $1 million contract. We never really fully sized what the customer could be because they didn't even know, right? They were expecting it to be a certain number of users, what have you. What happened with ServiceNow, once it got implemented, more people would start showing up to use it, it would grow. So 6 months after the go live of the system, we usually see 20 to 40% increase in ACV size. So I'm looking for something like that. Did they have the second product that came out? Was it welcomed in the market? if you didn't have a great first experience, you're not going to say yes to the second product. So there are ways, even in a multi-year relationship, to start seeing upticks in revenue from those customers.
What happens to the generation of companies that have raised at very high prices, largely from 2020, 2021, and they've kind of plateaued and they're not moving into those valuations? What happens to them? Is it a roll-up play? Where do they go?
I think we're in the process of figuring that out. I think some of them are reaccelerating the growth right now. So that's one category. Those should be fine. I really believe some of those are going to come out really, really good, and they'll be better for this journey. There's a few others where, I'm not so sure. I mean, I would honestly say they're probably worth more as cash than they are as independent companies. And some of them have made the choice to refund the cash back to the investors, sell off the assets. There's a couple out there that's happened to recently. And then there's a few others that maybe they'll use the cash to come up with the second or third act, right? They've got enough. If that founder has the fortitude and wants to continue on that journey. A lot of the founders are like, boy, this is hard. I'm not so sure.
I always think a $10 billion company needs a second or a third act. And I always say the difference between a $1 billion company and a $10 billion company is a founder who's able to transition between chapters. That is it.
Yeah, I can see the logic of that. I think it's rare that your first product's a $1 billion product on its own. There are some.
$1 billion company, not $1 billion revenue.
I'm talking $1 billion revenue. $1 billion company, I think you could do with a single product
exactly. I'm saying $100 million revenue.
Yeah, that's not a problem. I think about valuation a lot, and I think about the steps that you need to do to get there.
Have you done a deal yet where, with the benefit of hindsight, you are like, oh, fuck, I paid too high a price?
Oh, sure. In 21, I definitely feel like sometimes that time in place, we probably paid too high a price. At the same time, because I was worried about that, I missed a couple at earlier stages where I thought they were too expensive. And I came back, I looked at them in the A, I looked at them in the B, may have even looked at them at the C, thought they were expensive every way, and then bought in at the D. And built relationships with people who are like, okay, these guys have continued to pivot the right way, and it's expensive for a reason. And when you have that combination of founder, market, team going on, then it's probably worth spending money on. But you've got to get really convinced that team and that founder has got what it takes to keep going forward and making it.
Is it harder or easier to win deals than you thought?
I think every great company is competitive. There's a lot of dollars chasing deals.
Do you think every great company is competitive?
It's rare. And I think now the benefit is I've had founders specifically tell me they want me on their board. And so then it's a question of, can we get close enough to what expectations are, to what makes sense? You know, there was a specific situation where it was a Lightspeed earlier stage company. The founder was selecting for board members that could help scale the company and help with no route to market. And he selected Carl Eschenbach and myself. We split it around with Sequoia, 50-50. And Carl and I both joined the board. Probably the two, I can say this for sure with Carl, one of the best executives out there who knows more about revenue generation and leading companies than almost anybody in the Valley. So to be alongside of him on this journey and build out this company, or at the request of this founder, was phenomenal.
How much ownership do you need to be in that position? It's got to be worth your time.
It's got to be worth my time. So I'm typically in a growth deal if I'm going to take a board seat, it's usually a $75 million check. I'll break the rule and go to 50 sometimes, but mostly it's 75 minimum, with the goal of doing more over time before it goes public.
So you're wanting 10% ownership?
Ownership percentages aren't necessarily the most important things. I want to be in the right vehicles in the right places and have enough money to work to make it matter.
How do you think about upside then? When you think about what is good enough and what you need it to be attractive enough, I'm sorry for asking, because in really early stage partners, we talk about ownerships as kind of the core focus. And so for you, I totally get it in terms of kind of dollars invested as the core focus. But what is that upside requirement then? Is it a 5x, 10x?
Yeah, we're usually in growth trying to underwrite, can it be, 5 to 10x kind of outcome? Where we have a kind of a view of what we call super stamps, the companies that we really want to be in that are the future IPO companies. And those may not have the same direct return. The risk is much less, right? Hopefully the risk is de-risked a little bit. And then there's what we think are the future franchise, earlier stage bets that we're going to go in and kind of layer in over time and look for even more upside. So we kind of bifurcated our growth view a little bit, trying to do right by our investors and right by our portfolio.
How do you think about concentration across rounds? When you think about reserves today, how do you think about that? Is it a kind of one and done, we like to put 75 in, or is it continuous across rounds?
It's continuous. It doesn't always mean we participate every round, right? So sometimes things get too expensive. And we'll make a choice that our risk-adjusted rate of return for that deal isn't something we want to pursue at the same level as we would have an earlier round. We will try to participate every time we can. And if the prices are right and the business is executing well, we're going to definitely layer in. We have a fairly significant sized fund, so we've got a lot of powder, but it's very important that we get the kind of returns we need.
How quickly do you think you know it's a good investment? I take the view that actually you know in 3 to 6 months.
I was going to say, usually 3 to 6 months, you uncover all the warts that you didn't see that they hid from you in the diligence process.
Oh wait, we actually don't have any revenue that was made up? Yeah, no, those ones.
Hopefully not that. But
have you had a fraud yet?
I personally have not had a fraud. I've had.
Oh yes, so now I've got an experience that you don't have.
Yeah,
there we go.
You have to tell me about that over a beer. I've not, at least to my knowledge, had a fraud. I've had assumptions not be correct. So assumptions we made on a deal that didn't come to be, something changed really fast in the business. And you saw that with a lot of what we call the COVID winners. And then the people that now that COVID is sort of in a different chapter, their business isn't acting the same as it was before.
So Jason Lemkin, who's a friend of mine, I'm sure you know him from kind of the SaaS ecosystem. He always says, actually, I've stopped giving feedback. I don't give feedback because, maybe the nicest founders will say thank you and then not listen. But everyone else just says bluntly, go away. And feedback is not appreciated. To what extent do you agree with that or disagree?
Feedback when you decide to make an investment or when you decide not to make an investment?
Well, let's start with when you decide not to make an investment.
I try to call every founder and talk to them about the fact, at least, thanking them for the time.
How many founders do you meet a week?
Oh, gosh. I'd say between 4 and 8.
That's a lot of calls to make.
Yeah. Now, if I'm not the one leading it, my partners who are leading it, I'm sitting in those meetings. So if it's one that I'm leading, I'm going to definitely make that call. But I also tell people, I tell people that, hey, even if I don't make the investment, call me sometime. And that's a test. I want to know if they're thinking about me as a resource, because maybe there's something about it where I just didn't have the conviction yet, but I'm curious enough about the business, and I'm curious about them on, are they going to ask me smart questions? Are they going to engage? Are they going to understand the value of David Schneider and Coatue, or one of my partners on their cap table? And if they do, then that's great. And if they don't, so be it. I'm always in the business of matchmaking, right? So I've got this massive network of people that used to work for me that are always looking for jobs. So if somebody, again, not even in my portfolio, is like, hey, I'm curious, I'm looking for, this happened last week, I'm looking for a sales leader in Chicago. Well, I'll hit my Chicago Rolodex and say, hey, there's 5 guys in Chicago that are worth talking to. I'll make a couple introductions and go on the way.
Have you lost a deal yet?
Partially. There was a deal that I got really excited about that when it came down to valuation, we did not hit the number that the company wanted, and I'm sure glad I missed it. So that was one that I probably dodged a bullet because it was the height of 21, and it was in the billions of dollars, and we just looked at it and said, it's just too rich for us, and we walked away after being told he wanted us to lead it. And then we walked away over price. So that was a good learning opportunity, but I don't know if that's a loss. There's another one where we got smaller positions than I wanted. And that's a really hard part for me, Harry, because if my position's too small, it's hard for me to dedicate the time. And so I have to try to tell these founders, hey, this is going to be awkward. I know you want me on the board, but I can't use one of my spots.
Why didn't you just say no?
Check.
I know, because listen, I'm by no
means
the
hardest thing.
I'm by no means the OG that you are, but I have zero time. I'm just like, no.
I've said no a couple times, and one that I said yes to, I do think it's going to be a generational company. And I think and I really love the founder. I've known him for 10 years. So it's one of those where existing investors preempted a round. We got a smaller piece than I wanted. There was a commitment to try to drive more. It didn't happen. And so now we've had the honest conversation about, hey, it's going to be harder for me to spend the kind of time you need. And unfortunately for him, he's in the process of needing that help. But I got to figure out what the right thing is. I want to be friendly, but I also have a business to run, and I got to watch my time.
Do you share Vinod Kosa's view that 90% of VCs detract value?
My terminology from experience is there are VCs that are seagulls, and here's my definition. They fly into a room, or fly into a meeting, fly into a location. They basically take a shit and they fly away. They talk a lot. They give work to do for other people to do on the management team that distracts the management team from doing anything that's important. And you've got to control for the seagull. And this goes into the quality of the board that you're bringing on and the kind of people, and also goes into, as a management team, you need to set the tone and set the agenda for what's important to you. So for example, when I led the review of any portion of ServiceNow or data domain, I started with the 3 things that were working, that were really green, and the 3 things that were red. If somebody wanted to help me on something in the red, be my guest. But if you wanted to bring another thing on my list, it wasn't welcome, because I already know my business. And so having the confidence as an operator to say to the board, this is what's going on in my business, here's what I'm working on, that keeps the seagulls away. And it keeps them different.
So for founders listening, there will be so many founders on their way to the office listening now going, that's my fucking board. That's my board. What would you advise them? Come with the 3 reds and the 3 greens?
Control. And I think it is really important to control what you want to have a conversation about. Set the agenda. Spend time before the meeting talking to people what you want to have a conversation. Don't surprise people. Give them time to do the pre-read. If any board member is coming in without doing the pre-read, that's shame on them. You actually don't need them. Yeah. They've got to do the work too.
I always say call each board member up beforehand. It can be 5-10 minutes, but just like, hey, David, what would you like to achieve out of this board meeting? You say, hey, I'm worried about our sales efficiency. Great. Why don't I address that with you now? Have you resolved that? Yes. Great. Then we don't need to take it to the board.
Yeah. Sometimes it needs to be at the board meeting. Sometimes it doesn't.
Totally.
But I do think it's up to the management team to drive the clarity of thinking, and avoid, when you're interviewing potential board members, look for relevant experience. Not the fact that they've been on 8 other SaaS boards, but have they ever done anything themselves? And I would just call that out. There are now enough people in the venture and growth investing world where people have had hands-on experience that you should drive from. And some people don't have it. And so it's that kind of a nice mix that you want to look for.
I'm going to do something really unfair. 3 board members that you most like to work with.
Well, so Doug Leone was on my board at ServiceNow. He's on 2 boards I sit on now. He's phenomenal. Love working with him.
What makes him so good?
He's got wisdom. He's been around. He's practical. He also knows just about everybody and can get people together on topics very quickly. And he doesn't tell people what to do. He gives them ways of thinking about it, which is what I try to do as well. So it's he's also patient but demanding, which is kind of a little bit like me too. Like, you can be demanding, but you have to be patient, understand the cycles. And he's incredibly responsive. I mean, if I make a phone call when I was at ServiceNow to Doug, and it was very rare, usually he was calling me for advice. So he was responsive to me at wherever he was in the world within seemingly like 15 minutes. I would say Mike Volpe, who's now I think in the process of retiring from active doing new boards, he brings an operator mentality with him. The other guy that was on one of my boards, Anil Bushri, who no longer does this as a living because he started Workday, but he was on my data domain board, and he was awesome because of all the people he convinced the engineering and product team before they started putting hands on keyboard to go spend 100 conversations with customers to know their problems. And I think so many founders get it wrong. They rush to start building a product without knowing the customer and knowing what you're building for. And I think that kind of advice is so practical still to this day. And I think that's a lesson I learned from Anil.
I always say to everyone, hey, put everyone in support for 2 weeks minimum. Just hear the pain points, hear what they want, hear what they don't like, just hear everything. It's the best way to do it. You have seen board members, both as an operator, now as an investor. You're the OG of operations. I said the joy of my job is
Does that mean I'm old?
No, it means you're an OG.
Okay. Well, I don't know. I thought that meant I was old.
Oh, no. I'm far more charming than that. But I am early in my career, and I want to be the best board member that I can be. What advice would you give to me on what I can do to be the best board member?
Everyone has a superpower, right? And I think everyone's job is to find their spike and try to leverage it on behalf of the companies and people that they're dealing with on a regular basis. So for you, it's probably a bit of the networking that you have and your perspective on the world. Your PR capability from what you do here at 20VC is pretty amazing. And I think, again, pattern matching for people because you're seeing so many different situations. So I think that's probably then also teaching.
Do you find pattern matching hard as an investor though now? Because you have your Slootman, your Bill McDermott, you've got the best of the best CEOs in the world. At a point in the career though, where they've seen it all, done it all, and they're OGs. And then you're kind of translating that to a 30-year-old founder building a B2B product. And they might just be as good. They're just earlier on the curve, but you're doing a like for like given the experiences that you have. Is that hard?
Well, so I don't compare the Frank Slootman that exists today after 3 IPOs to the founders that I'm working with at a Series B or A. That's not a fair compare. I can compare because I worked with Frank at Data Domain when it was his first CEO job and how he was and what he was doing to drive urgency.
I've got to ask about 2 people and then we'll do a quick fire. But one is the Lafonts. You work with them now. What are the biggest takeaways from working with them?
The reason I picked Coatue out of all the firms I was looking at was they themselves are innovative. They themselves are entrepreneurial. They themselves are trying to build the best company in the world in the categories that they serve. They're not afraid to try something. And Thomas had great vision. He said the color of money isn't going to change. It's going to be green in the case of the US dollar. But the way in which we can service our investments will have to change if we want to be world class. And so he went out and recruited guys like me and Dan and Karen and others to join the firm to make us different than everybody else who is just doing traditional growth investing.
I want to do a quick fire because I could talk to you all day. So I say a short statement, you give me your immediate thoughts. Does that sound okay?
Sounds great.
Okay, so what do you believe that most around you disbelieve?
Maybe that people are the difference makers. That if you can get a group of people together who have a lot to prove, who really have the hunger to do something, that can really make the difference in a problem. And you got to let them run at the problem.
Biggest lesson from flying 100,000 miles a year?
The biggest lesson is you're there for a reason. It's to go talk to customers and impart your wisdom on the culture of the company. Every time you're in a city, don't waste any moments. If you're not having a dinner with a customer, have dinner with employees or partners. Understand that the windshield time in a car with employees is valuable. Don't be distracted by your phone or your social media. Talk to them about their lives, talk about their hopes and dreams. And what you find is people are fairly aligned. And that when they are aligned, you can do incredible things with that group of people. We all have similar hopes and dreams. We may want to get there a little differently, but it's financial security for our families, doing interesting work, maybe get promoted, taking a couple of vacations a year. Those are the things that tend to be the most common. And you can really sink into that with everybody.
I always find it quite funny. Someone said to me the other day that we spend our whole childhoods trying to fit in and we spend all of our adulthood trying to stand out.
I went from wanting to be liked to wanting to be respected. And that was a very important lesson as I went from an individual contributor to a manager to a leader. And, respect is something that's earned. And that's the most important thing.
Do you agree with the shit sandwich feedback now? Like I eat a shit sandwich, it's like, oh, Dave, you did really well here, but this wasn't great. But overall, you're doing great. Maybe I'm just getting old and jaded and cynical. I don't have time for a shit sandwich. David, this could have been improved. Why wasn't it done like this?
I'm a believer that feedback is a gift and it needs to be given frequently and as quickly to the situation as possible. And there are moments where I need it too. and I've gotten it, and I've made massive corrections on my behavior.
What was the biggest correction you made on your behavior?
This is it's a little embarrassing.
Go for it.
Okay, so my shit sandwich moment. Early days at Data Domain, I was really nervous about getting the product deployed and getting a couple good experiences going. And we had a proof of value running at a very, very large national lab in the Bay Area. And the product was not working the way it was supposed to work. In fact, it was a disaster. And I'd come from big companies where responsiveness between sales and engineering was slow. And so in my old company, big company mentality, I sent an email. And I sent it with about enough flames on it that would catch a mountainside on fire. And I sent it and copied Frank Slootman, thinking that Frank's going to have my back and he's going to go force them to go pay attention to me. And I was like, okay. I didn't even think about it because I'd worked for some companies where responsiveness was just not their middle name. Frank comes marching down to my office, closes the door, and I thought he was going to say, what can I do to help you? Instead, he said, if I ever see another fucking email like that, that'll be the last email you send here. And he goes, these people have been building this product for 3 years before we showed up. Give them the chance to be successful. Get up out of your chair, go talk to them. Ask them to go visit the customer with you, solve the problem. I immediately went over to all those people, apologized, brought them donuts and other things the next day, trying to rebuild trust because I just broke trust, right? And I realized these people were in the foxhole with me on a daily basis, and I should approach it from a human perspective. I need help. Can you help me? Within 3 days, we got that thing working, flying colors, sold the biggest deal we ever did in the company's history. We learned a lot together because the feedback was so instantaneous. It allowed me to fix something that I could have created a mortal sin around. And I tell people all the time, go first person in a conversation. Don't send email. Talk to people. Pick up the phone. Go meet them. If it means flying across the world to go have that conversation, better to do it that way than having an email.
When Slootman's pissed, is everyone scared?
It's not a pretty thing. When I'm pissed, everybody's scared. I mean, we're
new friends. You seem so lovely.
Yeah, I'm a teddy bear till I'm not, and then I'm like a grizzly bear. So, and that confuses people because I really do care deeply. But there are things that are unacceptable to me. And now in hindsight, I totally understood where Frank was coming from, and I respected him so much for coming to me right away. He fixed my behavior. He may not even remember that conversation, but it's one of the most cementing moments of my life around how to build great culture in a company and how to destroy culture in a company. And so that was a massive learning opportunity for me. I'll never forget it. Thankful that it happened. And I try to teach other people about it.
The joys of Siri, always helping a situation. Can I ask, Bill McDermott, one of the most hailed CEOs of our time, biggest takeaway from working with him?
So I worked with Bill at the end of my ServiceNow career. He joined in a kind of weird situation. We had John Donahoe, who's a great human being, great CEO as well. He's now the CEO of Nike. John was on the board at Nike, got the offer of the lifetime to go be the CEO of Nike. It was something he'd always been interested in doing. And so he took it. Bill gets parachuted in on our third CEO transition in the 10 years that I was there. And what really is apparent to me is Bill understands enterprise SaaS. He understands sales as well as anybody. I'm really good at selling. Bill may be even better, which is hard for me to admit.
What makes him so good at selling?
I think both of us do a very good job of creating stories about understanding customers, listening, meeting them where they are, trying to solve the business problem. Then Bill is just really smooth. Like I can sometimes fumble over a word here and there. I've never seen Bill fumble over any word. He just has a certain way about him. And then his relationships with executives is second to none. He spent, I think, 10 years at SAP. He knows every large CEO, large company CEO, CIO, world leader on speed dial. He's just super connected. So as a CEO in a company the size of ServiceNow, at times we need help getting to a board level discussion because the funding decisions are so big. We're talking 10, 25, 50 $million a year sometimes for these transformational efforts. That's a big lift for any company.
That is a big lift. Final one. What question are you not asked often or ever that you should be asked more?
I think it's part of my superpower, and it's part of what drives me is I fear failure, even though I don't know what it looks like. Meaning I'm afraid of not doing my best work and somehow dropping the ball or disappointing someone or something in the process. And so for me, it's this drive to constantly think about all the different possibilities so I can do the best job of stewarding a team, myself, through a situation and get to the outcome. So, when I go to sleep at night, I'm thinking, yeah, the day was pretty good, but I'm also thinking about, okay, what do I need to do to improve for tomorrow? And how do I make it a better day? And I think that's part of who I am. Now, I've tried to harness that in some kind of mindfulness exercise, be a little more sane in my approach, but I was always kind of unsettled, thinking I needed to do more, was part of my issue.
I found the most reassuring thing, the recognition that 90% of your worries have never actually happened.
Yeah. Anytime you get close to one of those worries happening, it's a scary thing. And we all have our foibles, and as I said, we're all survivors of something, and we have to grow from every experience. I think as I've gotten older, one of the things I've realized is the past is the past. What did I learn from it? How am I going to adopt it going forward? And now when I work with executives, we're debriefing about a quarter, I'm like, the thing I'm really looking forward to, what did we learn from the last 90 days? How is it going to change our approach for the next 90 days or the next year? And how are we going to build from here? I don't want to spend too much time worrying about the past. I want to build from whatever just happened and go forward. And I think that's a very powerful way of positioning that insecurity into a strength. And I'm trying to deal with that.
Thank you so much for being such a great guest. And I've so enjoyed having you on.
Well, it's great. I love listening to your podcast. Again, I learn along with everybody else who's listening to your podcast. So thanks for doing what you're doing. And I appreciate it.
You're very kind. Thank you so much, my friend.